Can you all hear me?
Also, da tene da shamlia 아주 가수대 디 넘숨탑에 샤 넘숨탑에 샤의 제반세의控制不及
We need to cover the sources for determining what meat that is triply pure or pure in the three ways comes from. So I'd like to show this to you. Now I forgot to show this here. These are the words from the these are the quotes from the ninth Karmapas rules for the rules for the guard encampment. Now these are the quotes from the Vinaya commentary, the Orb of the Sun, and from the 100 Short Instructions. So now here, maybe perhaps better to start out explaining this way. Now, the sources for the background story for the meat that is pure in the three ways. In the 4th century, there was a Vinaya master named, Chinese Vinaya master named Vinaya Life. He was one of the earliest who went to, and he went to the, he was a Sri Lankan master. He went to the, and he was one of the earliest masters who went to China, the Sri Lankan master, and he wrote these. Travel account of his travels to going to that. This Chinese master went to India, and the main reason he went was to find complete texts on the Vinaya. So that is the reason why he went from China to India. And so when he returned to China from India, he brought with him many Vinaya texts from different schools. And at the same time, he brought a Sinhalese or Sri Lankan manuscript. There was a master called Chatspin or Chipin, a small country that in the 5th century was to the west of China. And there was a Vinaya master named Bidulai from that region. And he broke it down in Chinese, and then a master named Dharma Light then translated. And so this is the 5 sections of the Vinaya of the Mahisheshikasko. And so the manuscript for this was the one that was brought from Sri Lanka. And so in this case, this is translated by the master, the Ornament of Prajna is the name of the master. Now I forgot it. I translated this the other day, but I don't think it turn out exactly right. I said I don't think it turned out all quite right, but I thought it just, I translated it I basically translated it to give something to show to all of you. And what it says is, When the Tathagata was traveling to Vaishali, he went to a monastery where he taught the Dharma on the banks of Markata. So this is the region of Vaishali. There's a place called Markata. So it's like a river or a lake. The reason why it's called the monkey pond. Actually, and the reason it was called this is called the Markata or monkey pond. He stayed at a monastery at that point. On that occasion, there was a general named Lion. I said the general named Lion in our Mulasarvastivada Vinaya strictures that are in the Tibetan tradition, in the Tibetan conjurer. This is mentioned. He is mentioned in the Mulasarvastivada inscriptions. But there are two different translations. There are two different ways his name is translated. One is translated as the captain, Senge. Another is translated as the general, but the same person. If we look for the general Lion, there was a merchant, or there's a general named Lion who served the Sangha, and at the later time, he became very poor and had very little to eat. And so this is in our Vinaya scriptures. Because if you look for the general Lion, you'll see many of these events described. And so this general, so I'll explain more about this. Captain Lion, I always said, and basically when you say captain or general, the meaning is the same. And his name was Lion or Simha. And he was a student of the Jain Chichinigranta. He was a student of the teacher Naganta, who was a Jain teacher at the time of the Buddha. So he had heard that the Bhagavan came to this town and heard the great renown of the name Tathagata, complete perfect Buddha. With delight, he said, "I would like to see such a Tathagata and hear the Dharma." And he immediately prepared us to ride and left. Now I will just say the main point of the meaning. You can read it. So he understood that he heard that the Buddha said, "This is wonderful. I'd like to go see the Buddha and hear the Dharma," he said. And so he immediately got his horses and carriage ready and went to go see the Buddha. And from afar away, he saw the body of the Tathagatas of the body that was like a mountain of gold. And when he saw that, he came before the Buddha, prostrated with his head to the Buddha's feet, and sat to one side. And after he sat down, the Bhagavan taught for the general Simha's court. He taught the many teachings on the four noble truths. And while he was sitting there, he gained the immaculate eye of Dharma, which means that he saw the truth. He saw the nature of the truth. Then the general had got up and he kneeled, and he said, "I would like to invite the Buddha and the entire Sangha to a meal. And would it be okay?" he said. And when he asked this, the Buddha then said, "Accepted." He said, "It's okay." And the general understood that the Buddha had accepted. He was really happy. And he went back to his house. And he told the people who would often buy meat for him to buy all the meat of all the animals, of animals who had died, who had not been slaughtered, but people who had naturally died, to buy all of that meat, regardless of the cost. And when he bought them all, then that person went and bought all the meat of animals who had recently died, and then he spent the entire night making all the various different delicious meat dishes. And the next morning, when the sun rose, they then prepared the seats, and when everything was ready, he went back to the Buddha. The general went back to see the Buddha and said, "Now, the food and the seats are all ready. So now please, Buddha, tell me when you're going to come." And then the Bhagavan immediately with an entourage of the Sangha, went to the general's house. They sat down on the seats that the general had prepared, and the general himself, with his own hands, actually served the Sangha. He was really what happened, instead of, he didn't get all frenzied, but he was really happy. And then at that point, there are the students of the Jain teacher Nagranta, and his students had heard that the General Lion had invited the Buddha and the Sangha and prepared a great feast offering with meat, and they got really envious of this. And because the reason for that is that he was a student of the Jain teacher Nigranta, and now he was a student of Nigranta, but now he was like making offering to the Buddha. They got really jealous of this, and so what they did is they went down the sides and they went all the intersections of the roads, and they said as loud as saying as loud as they can, General Lion has turned away from his teacher. He's lost the meaning of Dharma. But if we say these days, he's broken his commitments. And today he has offered the meat of goats that have been killed, and offered them to the false spiritual teacher Gautama. That is an incorrect spiritual teacher. And so they said this like with song and melodies. And they went down all the different roads, the side roads, and everywhere, declaring this. And they went to see this. And now the bhikshus heard this, right? The bhikshus who came with the Buddha heard this. And when they heard it, they didn't dare to eat. And when they didn't dare to eat, then the General Lion saw this, and he understood this, and he immediately knelt down with his knee on the ground and said to the Buddha, "The students of Nigranta have despaired to the Buddha, saying that he's doing something that he hasn't. If from today on, as long as I live, I will not intentionally knife. And if I make that, and so these the meat that you're eating is not food that was slaughtered to eat, and so it's naturally animals that died a natural death. So the bhikshus not have any suspicions or have doubts." And the Bhagavan said to the bhikshus, "Oh, okay, you don't need to worry about it. Enjoy it as you wish. Please have your meal." And then after the meal, then he distributed water for them to wash their hands. And in the old tradition is then they sat down on a small seat in front of the Buddha, and the Buddha said words of rejoicing and told him how it was good that he'd make the offering, and very good that he had made the offering to the Sangha. And so he said these words of praise and rejoicing, and then the Buddha rose from his seat and left. And then when he went back, they'd gone to the General Lion's house and eaten the meal, and the non-Buddhists had despaired to the Buddha and said there's so much that happened that the Bhagavan then gathered all the Sangha. He summoned all the Sangha, and he said to them in particular, and what he said to them is, in the future, when we eat meat, there are three types that we must not eat. And what these three are, as meats where we have seen, heard, or had suspicions. When he said meat, that we said seeing or hearing or having suspicions. So seeing means when you actually see the slaughter yourself. Hearing means that if there's an individual whom you have confidence, who's credible, and actually hear that from them that it was killed for your sake. And suspicion means that if you suspect that it was killed for your sake. Well, those are what it should be. And if you see, have not seen, have not heard, or have no suspicion that it was slaughtered for your sake, then that is pure meat. And then you can eat it as you wish. If the animal was slaughtered for the sake of a bhikshus or novices, we're not allowed to eat it. But there's something strange in here, though. It's that something strange. It says, if it's killed for the sake of a bhikkshu, bhikshus and novices are not allowed to it. Bhikkshunis, nuns, and nuns in trainings, novice nuns, and laymen and laymen. And so, like basically, if it's killed for a bhikkshu, so bhikshus and novices are not allowed to eat it. But then it says bhikshus and nuns in training are allowed, and novices. Now, if it is killed for bhikshunis, nuns in training, or novices, then the bhikshunis, nuns, and novices and laymen are not allowed to eat it. So basically, it's saying that those for whom whose sake it was slaughtered are not allowed to eat it. Now, as I mentioned before, this is the background story, or the source for the rules about the not eating meat that has impure in the three sorts of ways. Now, also, in terms of the Vinayavasta, or the topics of the Vinaya of the Mula Sarvastivada in the Tibetan tradition, there's a very similar text, and so that is a text. Generally, it's a similar. And the Buddha was staying in the house on the bank on the Markatahasa in Vaishali. And here, then, a captain named Nullava. So if you search for someone named a captain named lion, then you find this one. If you look for a general lion, then you won't find it. But because there are different events described above them, so the words are slightly different, but the actual meaning is the same. In any case, what is in Tibetan, if you compare what is in the Tibetan scriptures and what is in the Mahashashaka scriptures that are preserved in Chinese, I think that the Mahashashaka scriptures are actually clearer, as I see it. But in any case, when the Buddha was, basically the story is that because these Jain students had said that General Lion had given meat to the Sangha, and they said that it was killed specifically for the Sangha, that's the reason, that's the event behind the rules for not eating the three types of meat. Now, also, there also is a quotation from the there is also a scripture from the scripture. Okay, there's a Tamra Shatya school, which is written in text. It was preserved in Chinese as well, and I have translated from that to quote it. It says, "Received with seeing, what is gained by seeing? If you do not see an under their individual, kill it, but receive it for a bhikkhu's sake, there's no offense if you eat it," and so forth. Now, the Tamrashita, this is one of the 18 original schools of Buddhism, and this is this is a school that primarily developed in Sinnar, the region of Sri Lanka, and so this is recorded in the histories. This Tamrashitya school is actually considered like the source of the Theravada the source of the Theravada school, and so it's considered part of the Theravada school. And they also have a text called "The Great Treasury of All That Is Seen to Be Excellent," or the Samatapasa Adhika. And this is in the Pali language. And I think that this is a very detailed description of the three meat that is impure for the three reasons. So I have translated this quotation from Chinese. And so what it says is, if I read it, it's strange, but basically the main meanings, the main points of this is, there's received through seeing. There are three ways that you can get it. There's the way from receiving it through seeing. When receiving through seeing means, if you see another individual, slaughter the animal. But if it is not for the bhikshu's sake, you see this individual centered, but then later, then you get the meat but there's no offense of meeting that meat because it was not killed for that monastic, so there's no offense to eat it. Now, received through hearing says if the bhikshu himself hears the sound of the slaughter, here's the sound of the animal being slaughtered, but it was not slaughtered for the bhikshu's sake, then if the bhikshu receives the meat and eats it, there is no offense. Now, received through hearing. Received through suspicion means that when bhikshus go to the town on their alms round and see fresh meat that the donors have fresh meat, and if they're seeing fresh meat, the bhikshus might think that it is killed for the bhikshus. Now, if the donor then says that is not killed specifically for the bhikshus, then there's no offense to eating that meat. Likewise, if the donor invites bhikshus, and one of them is senior and one is junior, now they both come, and when they offered meat to the two of them, when offering that meat, if the junior thinks, okay, this meat was slaughtered for the senior bhikshus, it wasn't slaughtered for my sake, so if I eat it, there won't be an offense. If they think that. Now, the elder monk thinks, this is killed for the junior monk's bhikshu's sake, not for mine. So if I eat it, there won't be an offense. And so they each harbor these doubts about each other. And because they have these doubts, they can't really decide, and they don't really know. If they both eat it, then there's no offense. If it was killed for a bhikshu's sake, but the bhikshu does not know is offered to it until after he's eaten it, then there's no offense because he didn't know. But the most important thing is that when the bhikshu is offered meat, then the bhikshu has to ask questions. When you say, was this slaughtered for my sake? You have to ask. If you do not ask, then you cannot determine whether the meat was impure in the three ways or not. For example, it's similar, like pork and bear are very similar. So when you're offered it, you have to ask, is this bear meat? Because you're not allowed to eat bear meat. And so for that reason, you need to ask. It's very important to ask the questions. The most important thing is that it depends upon not upon the person who's receiving it, but upon the donors. So the donor generally knows, so the bhikshu must ask the donor about the meat. And so that describes it very, very clearly. No, I basically just translated them, and I didn't have time to proofread them properly, proofread the spelling properly. Now, if you look at this, citation, in the time of the Tamaraashita, for this similar from the quotation from that, when bhikshus are going on their alms round, if they're going to beg for food, basically, when they're offered food, then before they accept, they have to ask about it. You need to examine whether it is pure in the three ways or not. If it is for your own sake, or if it's for the sake of the monastics, if it is meat that the animal was slaughtered for their purpose and then offered, then it is impure meat and it may not be eaten. And so what this shows is that the bhikshus, if they eat it, if the bhikshus are not careful about eating animals that are slaughtered for their sake, then there's the danger that many animals will be slaughtered for the sake of the sangha. And so for that reason, there's a harm to doing this. That is why there's an offense. Now, there's also a Sarvastivada scripture called the 10 Sections of the Vinaya. And this is from the Sarvastivada tradition. It is in the Chinese tradition, and there's a spelling mistake that I need to mistake. If and if I don't fix it, I won't feel comfortable. So now the spelling is fixed. So this the 10 sections of the Vinaya, the Dashabhanavara Vinaya, the Sarvastivada tradition writes. What it says here is, to that circumstance, the Bhagavan assembled the Sangha. Now, so as I mentioned before, there was the event that happened with the generalist lion. And because of that circumstance, the Bhagavan assembled the Sangha and he spoke to the Sangha. And when he said to them, what he said is, you may not eat pure meat that is pure in the three ways. And what are the three ways? By seeing with your own eyes, or hearing with your ears, or suspecting in your mind. If that happens, then you're not allowed to eat the meat. What is seeing with your eyes is in your actual sight. You see a living creature slaughtered for your own sake. That is seeing on your own. And seeing means if a credible individual, if any old person comes and say it was slaughtered for your sake, you shouldn't believe. But if it's a credible individual, it tells you that living being was slaughtered for your sake, then that type of meat shouldn't be eaten. Now, what is pure suspicions? And therefore, there are some circumstances that you have suspicion, like there's some reason why you think that. It's like maybe there's like the Vidula, there's like no butcher in that region. Because there's no butcher, then it's possible that that the household itself must have slaughtered the animal. Since there's no butcher to slaughter the animals, it's probably the household that had slaughtered it. And there were no animals that died naturally in that region. And the leader of the household is someone who does a lot of misdeeds and kills many animals. Then there's a danger that they killed it for your sake. Then there's a reason to have a suspicion, and so you should not eat that. Now, meat. So that is the way that there are three reasons why meat would be impure. Now, meat that is pure of those three ways may be eaten. So this is what it says in the Sarvastivada scriptures. Likewise, in Chinese Buddhism, like for example, in Tibet, we practice the Mula Sarvastivada tradition. That is our Vinaya practice. And now, in the Chinese Buddhism, we primarily practice the Dharmaguptaka tradition tradition. So here is something that I've translated from the Chinese. I do not allow you to eat meat that is impure because of these three reasons. Because if you see that it's slaughtered for your sake, or hear from a credible individual that is killed for his sake, and here what's special here is if you go to that household and you see the animal's head or the animal's hide or the animal's hair and so forth, or if you see the feet and limbs and so forth and the blood and so forth, or if the individual, the leader, the head of the household is someone who acts on the 10 virtuous actions and always kills or habitually kills, then there's the danger that it was killed for your own sake. And for that reason, if you have suspicions, then you may not eat that meat. Meat that is pure in the three ways may be eaten. And so that means if you have not seen, have not heard, and do not suspect, if it's pure of being seen or hearing or suspicion, then it may be eaten. Likewise, there's the Mahashashika school. And from the 5 sections of Vinaya from the Mahishashika school, there's a very similar scripture, but what's a little bit different about it. It's basically the same, but what's different about this is that in it said if it's killed for bhikshu and bhikshus, then, as I said, it's similar to what I said before. It's killed for sake of bhikshus and novices are not allowed it. If it is killed for bhikshus and nuns in trainings, bhikshus and bhikshunis and novices and lay people are able to eat it. So basically, those for whose sake the animal was slaughtered are not allowed to eat the meat. Now the last one, The last citation I'd like to give is from the Mahasanghika Vinaya. And this Vinaya, this Mahasanghika Vinaya is probably only in Chinese. How this Chinese came is that in the fourth monk, as I mentioned before, the Chinese monk Dharma Light went to India. And from central India, he got this text, then brought it back to China. Later, then the Indian master, he translated it with the Indian master Buddhabhadra. He translated it together with Buddhabhadra. Now, what it says in here, it says, slaughtered for one's own sake means slaughtered for a bhikshu's sake. Slaughtered for a bhikshu's sake may not be a bhikshu, bhikshuni, non-training, novice nun, layman, or layman. So it's a little bit different than what was said in the Mahishashika school. So basically it's saying that no one who is a monastic may eat the meat. So the bhikshu, if it's now the Mahishashika school said if it's killed for the bhikshu, then only the bhikshu is not allowed to eat it, but the others may eat it. But here it says that any monastic may not eat it. So if it's the Mahishashika school says that if it's killed for the bhikshu's sake, then the bhikshus and the novices may not eat it, but the others may eat it. But here it says that if it's slaughtered for a bhikshu, then it may not be eaten for the bhikshu, bhikshunis, nuns and trainees, novices, and so forth. It's the same. It is the same for what is slaughtered for a layperson's sake. Now this is very difficult. It is the same for what is slaughtered for a layperson's sake. It may not be eaten by any bhikshu, through it may not be eaten any lay people. It is the same. If what is slaughtered for it is the same for anyone, for any bhikshu or bhikshuni or so forth. If it's slaughtered for a lay person, then it may not be eaten by the bhikshus, the novices, the bhikshunis, and so forth. So, except for the three types that are the three types, those that are from seeing, hearing, and suspecting. And so, so I've given quotations from 5 of the 18 original schools of Buddhism. So basically the citations from 5 of the different Vinaya, and most of these I have translated from the Chinese. And among them, the first 3 are primarily taught for the bhikshus. And the last 2 also say that household or lay practitioners with the 5 precepts, whether male or female, may not eat the meat that is impure in the 3 ways. Whether you're bhikshu, whether you are a monastic or lay people, it's important to know whether the meat is pure in the 3 ways. So basically, in all the different in all the types of Vinaya, it is important that we know what it is important to eat meat that is pure in the 3 ways. And so we need to understand what the 3 pure meat is pure in the 3 ways. So what does it mean to say it's 3 in the pure ways? So what it means. So what it means essentially is that whether it is a chicken or a pig or whether it's an ox, if you actually see with your own, if you don't see with your own eyes that it's slaughtered for your sake, or no one else tells you that it was slaughtered for your sake, so you don't hear it from anyone else. And that person, who has to be someone that's credible, not just some ordinary person, it has to be not just any old person. And if there's a suspicion or doubt that it might have been slaughtered for your own sake, you should not have any such doubt. Yeah. When we talk about the threefold purity, it has to be free of the being seen, heard, or the suspicion. And so that's not actually all that easy. In particular, if we think about the crux or the essence, if we talk about the most clear descriptions of this are in the Sarvastivada and the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya. If we do it according to the Sarvastivada Vinaya, it means that in that place that there is a butcher's house, it died naturally, and the householder did not kill for your sake. This is what it says, right? What the three aspects that need to be there. That household is not a butcher. The household at first is not a. And we need to know that it's not a butcher or a household that kills animals, and we need to know that it's not a place that's that sells meat. Because if they sell meat, it's possible that they kill, and that meat. And we have to know that it's not killed specifically for the monastic sake, but instead that it's that householder who practices the 10 virtues purchased for the monastic sake. So they have to know that it was not slaughtered specifically for the bhikkshu's sake, but particularly went intentionally to buy meat that was not killed for the monastic seat and then offered it to the bhikshus. Similarly, what it says in the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya is that when you go into the house, when you go to the house of the person who's giving the meat, you see the hat and the limbs or the hide and the hair and the blow and so forth. You don't see that there. And that individual is not a butcher. And is not only is not the butcher, but is also someone who keeps the rules of the 10 virtues, someone who has given up taking life, and so someone who you believe is this is someone who could not possibly have killed a sentient being for my sake. Not only are they not the householder is not a butcher. Not a butcher, but it's also possible that they might have summoned a butcher to come in. So there's someone who keeps the 10 virtues, because they keep the rules of the 10 virtues, then you may not kill for yourself, nor may you have another kill for your sake. And so you believe that they wouldn't have summoned anyone else to slaughter the animal for your sake. Likewise, if we look at the Sarvastivada 10 scriptures of the Vinaya, what it says is that it's like in the India, they used to have great offering feasts. They'd have a big pujas, basically the great offering rituals. In those times, many people would gather. And at that time, for that, there would be the meat of animals slaughtered for that particular offering and that occasion. And people would distribute the meat. And even those celebrations, the bhikshus were not allowed to go to those situations, because if you go to that sect, if you were among the people out there, there would be animals slaughtered for that offering. There'd be the danger that you'd be included among that. You would not. For that reason, you would not be allowed to go to these great offering ceremonies. So, for example, if you go to purchase meat from a meat seller, then there's actually pure as to whether that meat is pure or not. Likewise, also in the Dharmaguptaka tradition, it's similar. It said that if you go to a place where people are making large offerings, then there is a danger that they'll offer you all sorts of different meat, and you may not eat that. Likewise, in our Great Exposition and our Treasury of Abhartana, in both of these texts, is that after an animal has been killed, if you skin the animal, sell the animal, and cook the animals, these are like actions that are compatible with taking life. And so for these reasons and those sources, both the Sarvastivada and the Dharmaguptaka traditions if we look at their presentations of what is the threefold purity of meat, they are more narrow or have a more detailed or stricter presentation of what is the threefold purity, and their practice is stricter. And so when you talk about Chinese Buddhism or with our Tibetan Buddhism, there are the main sources from the Sarvastivada tradition. If when you talk about the way the 18 schools developed, in the general way, the basis that there are different bases for that. The first, there's one is the sources are the old histories of the Sri Lanka. That is one source for describing it. And one is and there's a text in the Chinese tradition and also in the tradition that describe the way the 18 schools developed. So these are the two main sources for describing the development of the 8 different schools. When we talk about this, then there are slight differences in terms of what the root schools are, but most schools, scholars used to explain it, that the 4 roots are probably the Theravada school, and so the Theravada school and the Mahasanga school. These are the 2 main schools, or the 2 original schools, or the 2 first divisions. And then from they had some disagreements, and so they became, and then they then from these 2 there were many different ones. Now the Sarvastivada school developed from the Theravada school. So our Tibetan tradition and our Vinaya practice all comes from the Sarvastivada, and the Chinese tradition primarily also is from the comes within the Sarvastivada tradition. And so the practice of the threefold purity of meat is stricter in these Sarvastivada schools than in other schools. So normally we might think that it's fine to eat meat. And we say the reason we say is because the teacher allowed us to eat meat that is pure in 3 ways. But this is a kind of too simplistic way of thinking about it. It's like it's the way a child would think about it. And the reason for that is that if they Vinaya as a basis, then a monastic, if a monastic was to go, they'd have to go and beg for the food, right? So you go to a household and go to them. You couldn't go to a house and say, "Please give me meat." You couldn't say that. Please give me meat, give me potatoes, give me meat. You weren't allowed to say that. You'd have to eat. You could only what that household gave you. You couldn't say, "I'm not going to take that. Take that away." If they give you potatoes, I am not going to eat potatoes. You have to give me meat. I give me chicken. You couldn't say, "I have to have your chicken." You couldn't say that. If you went to a poor house, if you said that, you'd say that the monastics are just like they'd say those. How could that? If you went to a poor household, they'd say if the monk went to that household and said, "Please do this," then please give me meat. Then the household think, "I can't do that. We don't have that for ourselves. How can we give it?" And so when you are offered meat, then you have to investigate whether it is pure in the 3 ways. And if it is not pure, then even if you're so hungry that it's like your stomach is burning, then you're not allowed to eat it. So if you say that you can eat meat as pure in the 3 ways, it means that you cannot eat meat, just any old meat. It's not saying that you feel like you wish to eat and then go up to and then to prove that we're allowed to say that we're eat as pure in the 3 ways. It doesn't mean that you can eat whatever meat happen you get your fingers on. It doesn't mean that at all. You have to have a source for saying that you can do. So this is another thing that we need to really think about. So now I think that is probably enough for today. So now what I'd like to speak about tomorrow is how meat is prohibited in the Manaya. Now, of course, there's one thing. Now, one reason I need to explain this. There is the Sakyapantita's it is said in the Devadatta's austerities that that not eating meat was in Devadatta's austerities, and so for that reason, many people these days that we should eat meat because otherwise we're following one of Devadatta's austerities. That's one thing I need to speak about. And so now also in the Mahayana, there are some prohibitions about eating in general, regardless of whether it's pure in the three ways or not. And likewise, there are many debates about eating meat in Tibet. Now, I think there's actually not a whole lot of reason to debate about this, but I think I'd like to share some thoughts about this. Also, these days in the world, how many animals are slaughtered? And so I'll speak about that. And I'd like to speak about the harm that comes to the environment from slaughtering animals for meat. And I'd also like to give a little brief introduction to about how eating meat affects your health. And so I'd like to speak about that tomorrow. So that's about it. So the other day, I did have to, I had to postpone it by one day. I've got a little bit tired. I was working too hard, and because my body got a little bit weak, and so. And also, I thought that since I'm speaking about eating meat and protecting sentient beings, so I thought I had to teach it as well as I could. So I delayed it by one day. So I beg your pardon for that. No, actually, this teaching is to end on the 14th, but there are a couple of days when I was unable to eat, or a couple of days unable to teach, and so for that reason, we'll be extending the teachings by 2 days. So on the 15th, we'll have a day off, and then on the 16th and the 17th, we will have teachings. It's quite possible that what I say doesn't match what is in the announcement, but we're going to follow what's teaching in the announcement. My mind isn't so clear right now, so we'll follow what's written in the announcement. And on the last day, I thought we would do some sort of a guru yoga. We've spent now a month or so in discussing the liberation story of Mikyo Dorje. And so because it's to celebrate this great opportunity, I thought we should do the Guru Yoga. No, but I haven't decided what type of Guru Yoga. We should maybe do something. So I think we should do something related to Mikyo Dorje. There's the 4-session Guru Yoga, and I thought maybe I should write something for it, but I don't know if I have time to write anything. But in any case, on the 17th, we will conclude the teachings. As I mentioned, next year, during the spring teachings, we will continue. I will continue to teach from the liberation story of Mikyo Dorje. So this is my plan. Yeah, actually, I thought should I say this on the last day, but if I say it today, it's better. We have the winter teaching, the Gunshu, for the Kagyu Shedras. And in addition now, we have the nuns. We've changed for the nuns Gunshadam. I thought we should change that to the spring teaching, as I mentioned. So now we need a summer teaching. Now we can't do it all 4 seasons. For the autumn teaching, probably good, but I think it's okay to do 3 of them: the winter teaching, the spring teaching, and the summer teaching. Now for the summer teaching, I often speak with the people, the Shedras, and I'm able to do some service for the Shedras. But we also have the Tsoktra, the puja monks and nuns, and I haven't been able to do anything in particular for them. And so for this year, from now on, I would like to thought I would start a summer teaching in particular for the monks and nuns who do pujas. This would be primarily related with the ritual, with the practices of the Yidam deities. This is specifically said for the, it's maybe not a good way of saying, but this is basically for the practice divisions. Sometimes we have like a conflict between the Shudras and the Tsoktra, between the study and the practice. And it's I don't know what word we can use for this, but for the sake of the ritual during the summer, we will have the summer teaching, and for their sake, we will have a special teaching related to the secret mantra practice. Now, I don't really know, but there's no choice but to pretend that I know what to say. So this is related to the secret mantra. It's not something that'll be for the public in general. It'll be primarily for the monasteries and the nunneries. If it is something for the whole public, then it wouldn't be right. So that is my plan. And so I thought I would mention that today. Now we talk about the practice. I would allow everyone to, all of the Shudras and the nun Shudras to participate as well. When I said that it's a non-spring teacher, if you think this is for the nuns, our monasteries, I think it's not really for us. You possibly might misunderstand it in that way. And I didn't really have a chance to explain this clearly. So the specific students is a difference. The difference in who it's specifically taught for, but in actuality, it is for all of our monasteries and nunneries, and it's just important that you all understand this. So thank you. So now we recite the closing prayers.
Sibe zole zhuge nyu zhu xiu Ti zhuo dang jie ren jie xie de Da ge sun man da ye gang do Ti nian zhuge ti zhuo dang bi xue ren jie chen ma bi bi nu yu ru ji Si xie ben zhu ma lu zhong ren Tu ve den ba yu ren ne ba Tin zin ji ben gi bo dan ba Ben zhu ru gi gi yu ren xiao den zhu
Thank you.